It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. 5 people have died, including a young girl, trying to cross the Channel in an overcrowded boat in the early hours of this morning. It happened just hours after Parliament approved the government's controversial Rwanda bill, designed to deter exactly this kind of crossing. Tonight, we'll have the latest from northern France, and we'll hear from asylum seekers in Derby, some of whom have already been warned that they could be sent to Rwanda. Also coming up, as the Welsh Government puts the brakes on blanket 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, we'll ask, war on motorists, or is 20 plenty? Plus, the plans to introduce an independent football regulator. We'll hear about the potential impact on smaller clubs from the chairman of Grimsby Town FC. And the marathon runner taking an unorthodox approach to hydration. We'll speak to the man who has racked up millions of views on social media after tasting a different wine for each mile. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. The government's controversial Rwanda policy was finally approved by Parliament late last night. But just hours later, tragedy struck again in the Channel. 5 people died, including a young girl, when an overcrowded boat of migrants trying to make their way to the UK got into trouble off the coast of France this morning. The Prime Minister has said that the deaths underscore the need for the Rwanda plan, which, he says, is designed to deter crossings just like this. Sky's Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports now from northern France, from where dozens of migrants have made this perilous journey to the UK today.
Celebrating as they head towards Britain, nearly 60 migrants on an inflatable dinghy with chaos and tragedy in their wake. Many were not meant to be on this boat. We're told dozens rushed aboard at the last moment, like these men in blue jackets, hijacking the boat, pushing the number to 112 passengers. It was too much, and when the boat hit a sandbar, people fell in, and a major rescue operation was triggered. Most were saved, but 5 died, 3 men, a woman, and a small girl. For Sandrine, the grief was personal. She recognised the child who died, knew her family.
I saw them bringing in the bodies on stretchers, and I saw the little girl who I knew. Her father fell into my arms, and I said to myself, this can't be possible. She's a child. They tried to resuscitate her. The helicopters arrived, but she died. And then there were 4 other bodies.
Abandoned on the promenade, the soaking clothes of those who perished.
112 migrants, c'est du jamais vu. Donc il y a eu vraiment une volonté peut-être dans un
112 migrants is unheard of, so there was a real desire, perhaps because of the improved weather, to increase the number of people in the boat, with dire consequences, which we deplore this morning.
The coastal roads full of activity, more migrants led away by police after further failed crossings. But many do succeed. Remember the men in blue jackets. Here's their boat in UK waters as a British lifeboat escorts them to England.
The number of small boats crossing the Channel is up, and already we've seen more deaths than we did in the entirety of 2023. That's why the government says it needs the Rwanda legislation as a deterrent.
For some of these people, the UK is a last hope of claiming asylum. Like these migrants we spoke to, many had tried to settle elsewhere in Europe and told us they were threatened with deportation.
Everyone wants to go to UK.
Why?
Because we have a problem.
European country deport.
Yeah.
Deport. In here, deport.
So you have to leave France?
Yes, France, Deutschland, but deport.
The Rwanda legislation will now enable the government to send people like this to Africa, but there's little sign here it would be a deterrent.
You think that Britain would not send you to Rwanda? That wouldn't happen?
No, Rwanda, no. Rwanda, Africa.
No,
Rwanda, Africa, no good. No safe.
You think life would be a lot better in the UK?
Yes.
This coastline is long and wavering, and it's hard to police. Overnight, 5 smugglers were arrested, but at dawn, we filmed a series of boats, all setting off to cross the Channel. There is no sign here that the flow is slowing. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Wimereux.
Let's bring in our communities correspondent Becky Johnson, who's been speaking to migrants who are already here in the UK. And Becky, just looking at the streams of people there in northern France, heading to the coast to try and get on those small boats to get to the UK. The idea or the talk of the Rwanda bill has been no deterrent thus far. In fact, some people haven't even heard of it. Now it's been passed into law. Do you think there'll be any difference? Will it be a deterrent now it's legal?
So I think for asylum seekers who are already here, who are receiving letters saying that they are possibly being considered for Rwanda, this has suddenly become real. And I've been speaking to many asylum seekers over many months, and actually for a long time never met anyone who felt that Rwanda was a deterrent. And I think the sense that you got from people was Rwanda has been talked about for such a long time by politicians with no action. So I think people just genuinely thought this was never going to happen. And I think that has now changed because, as I say, people have been receiving letters. A lot of people have had their asylum claims either deemed inadmissible or the process has stopped while they're considered to be sent to Rwanda. And all of a sudden, it feels very real to them, as you'll see now in my report.
You are all welcome here in Derby, and it is important that your voices can be heard by the Home Office in London.
The welcome from this charity in stark contrast with the government's intention to send people here to Rwanda. Several of these asylum seekers have been told they're being considered for removal. Hamza, who's from Iran, received this letter from the Home Office saying it may ask Rwanda whether it would admit him. I'm very stressed, he tells me. I don't know what to do. All I can think about is this letter and Rwanda. Most people here arrived recently on small boats. Then Rwanda was a risk. Now they fear it's a reality. They're in limbo, waiting to know if, when and how they'll be removed.
Rwanda is not a safe place.
Does it make you regret coming to the UK?
Yeah, if before I came here, you say that, they sent to me in Rwanda. I never come here.
Fatima doesn't regret leaving Afghanistan.
I fled my country in order to be safe, yeah? Otherwise, I'm gonna killed by Taliban.
How do you feel that you could now get sent to Rwanda?
It is not fair, especially for the one who came from Afghanistan.
Outside the meeting, Masood, who's from Iran, reveals an email confirming he too is being considered for Rwanda. Would you have come to the UK if you'd have known you could end up in Rwanda?
Never. Never.
Do you think it will stop other people coming now?
Yeah. I say to all asylum, don't come to UK.
His words could be seized on by the government as evidence the Rwanda plan will work as a deterrent. But more migrants have crossed the Channel so far this year than in the same period last year. And the policy now relies on flights actually taking off, unlike this failed attempt to get the first migrants to Rwanda back in 2022. The Prime Minister says an airfield is on standby and planes have been booked, but ministers accept there could again be appeals and delays.
It's inevitable, I'm afraid, there are going to be challenges. It's inevitable that people are going to try and throw everything at this to try and stop this plan from working.
10 to 12 weeks is the pledge for getting planes away. And if that doesn't happen, there's a risk many migrants will go back to seeing Rwanda as an empty threat. And the numbers matter too. There are more than 50,000 people potentially eligible. If just a tiny fraction go, asylum seekers could still fancy their chances of being able to stay in Britain. With an election looming, the views of voters will be key. Back in Derby, feelings are mixed.
Truly ludicrous thing to do. I don't understand how or why simply sending people to another country helps anything.
Pretty sure it's going to cost a lot of money, so when that could be put into other places.
Would you prefer that they were sent to Rwanda then remained here?
Most probably, yes.
But the Prime Minister has defined success as stopping the boats. If planes go to Rwanda, but migrants keep coming, the government will face accusations that its plan has failed.
Well, Becky, there's a real sense of urgency now for everyone involved, those facing deportation and the government, because the Prime Minister has said 10 to 12 weeks from now, the first planes will be leaving. But have we got any idea of the practicalities of making that happen?
Very little idea. Very few details have been made public. Now, is that because the government doesn't know, or is it because they're not telling us? They say they've got planes booked, but they haven't revealed which airline they're going to be using. They say there's an airfield ready, but they're not saying where it is. And as far as we know, we're not even sure that they've earmarked exactly the individuals who would be on the first plane. Look, for people like those that we've seen in my report who've received letters, the key question is how this is all going to play out. Are they just going to get a knock on their door and end up being detained somewhere, ready to go to Rwanda? They just don't know. Speaking to the union that represents the enforcement officials that would be doing the detaining of migrants, they don't know how it's going to be happening. They've been seeking risk assessments for example, if they had to go into asylum seeker hotels. I mean, not saying that would happen, but nobody knows. So this is something that the government's saying is going to potentially happen within 10 weeks, but the people who are going to be carrying it out don't know how it's going to happen, and the migrants themselves certainly don't know. Now, it could be that the government knows more and isn't saying because they're concerned that asylum seekers will simply start disappearing because they don't want to be sent to Rwanda, but really very scant details. And, you know, as I said in my report, the Prime Minister has made this such a key policy for the government now. It has to work for him. Otherwise, it'll look like he's out of ideas on a subject, immigration, that's just going to be such a big issue at the general election.
OK, Becky, thank you. Becky Johnson there, our communities correspondent. Thank you. Now, the Prime Minister also today promised to put the UK's defence industry on a war footing. This is, as he announced, tens of billions of pounds in extra funding. Stood alongside the head of NATO in Poland, Rishi Sunak warned of growing threats from Russia, Iran and China, as he pledged to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030.
I believe we must do more to defend our country, our interests and our values. So today I'm announcing the biggest strengthening of our national defence for a generation. We will increase defence spending to a new baseline of 2.5% of GDP by 2030. That starts today and rises steadily in each and every year. First, we will put the UK's own defence industry on a war footing. One of the central lessons of the war in Ukraine is that we need deeper stockpiles of munitions and for industry to be able to replenish them more quickly.
Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes is with me in the studio now. And Deborah, a big speech, a big announcement from the Prime Minister today. The UK on a war footing. What does that actually mean?
Well, he was talking about defence industry, which has been something that defence industry chiefs and the military have been crying out for ever since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine more than 2 years ago, that not just the UK but the whole of Europe needs to put its industrial base onto a war footing, which is basically massively expanding production, hugely pouring in money, signing contracts, getting supplies in, and then churning out weapons, missiles, ammunition at the same speed that Russia's doing. So Vladimir Putin put his economy on a war footing. It's much smaller than the combined economic strength of all the NATO countries, and yet Russia is outmatching NATO when it comes to supplying weapons for Ukraine versus what Russia can give its troops on the ground. So that's what the Prime Minister was talking about. But you have to look at the details here in this announcement. And yes, it sounds great. And this is what people have been wanting, like him to sound strong and tough. He kind of quoted Churchill in the 1930s ahead of World War II. But then he said that he's going to be ramping up this spending, £75 billion over the next 6 years. But actually this year, which is the only guaranteed time he is going to be Prime Minister, because you don't know what will happen after the election, there's going to be no new money from today for the UK military. There's £500 million for Ukraine, which is obviously important. But from the sources I'm speaking to, their response is, show me the money.
Yeah, he did say fully funded, didn't he? But as you said, he's only guaranteed to be around for a short amount of time. After that, we don't know. In terms of where this money would be spent, when we talk about getting on a war footing, where does that money go when you talk about spending more on defence?
I mean, a priority is on the stockpiles of ammunition, missiles. That's like a key. The top priority is missiles. Things like the Storm Shadow cruise missile that has been so effective for Ukrainian forces, they've taken out like a quarter of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and they've smashed like the headquarters in Crimea. They've really taken the war to Russia in a way that Russia really hasn't been able to defend itself. It's a good example of the way that British and French and American weapons have been used. But the UK has given a whole load of our stockpiles to Ukraine, as well as paveway bombs. These are things that are dropped from aircraft. There are other innovative ways that Ukraine can use them. We don't have an infinite supply of them. We give lots to Ukraine, we have nothing left. The cupboard is looking pretty bare, and so there's a massive urgency to replenish stocks, and whoever is Prime Minister after the next election will be under huge pressure, not just to stick to this 2.5% pledge, but many people believe that is way too unambitious, and it needs to go up to at least 3%, given the extremity of the threat.
OK, Deborah, thank you. Deborah Hayes, our Defence and Security Editor. Thank you. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we're going to be discussing the Welsh Government's U-turn on their policy of 20-mile-per-hour speed limits in built-up areas. Also ahead, a new photo of Prince Louis taken by his mother, the Princess of Wales, released today to mark his 6th birthday. And we'll be speaking to the London Marathon runner who tasted a different glass of wine at the end of every mile. Find out why. Why not?
Target towns like Grimsby and Cleethorpes will help decide who wins the next election. But here, like in so many towns, some people are indifferent about polling day. Join me, Sophie Ridge, for a Politics Hub special, when we meet those who say they don't want to vote. What will change their minds? And yours.
Breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Hello, welcome back. Now, many roads in Wales could return to 30 miles per hour by the end of this year, just months after lower limits were introduced. The Welsh Government has confirmed it is revising its policy of default 20-mile-per-hour limits in built-up areas. A call for the policy to be scrapped broke Senate records for the most signed petition on its website. And now, new guidance means local councils can start changing the limits back. Sky's Greg Milam has more.
If you're looking for a place where people have been driven to distraction by 20-mile-per-hour speed zones, it is here in Buckley. The town was home to one of the pilot schemes for the policy of making 20 the default speed limit. For months, drivers reported confusion and road rage. And 6 months after that policy took effect across Wales, new guidance means councils can now switch back. The result of public anger and a petition of nearly 500,000 signatures. And no one in Buckley is surprised.
I do agree that 20 mile an hour in streets and housing estates is good, but I mean, I work in the butchers in the precincts in there, and we had a lot of people used to come in and say that they wouldn't come to Buckley anymore and all that type of stuff. But like I say, looking at the roads and stuff like that, I don't think like many people do the 20 anyway.
I think the 20 miles an hour has just left a lot of drivers confused as to which roads are 20 and which roads are 30. So actually just streamlining it all back to 30 would probably make everyone's lives easier.
It's a crazy decision in the first place because bikes are more efficient now, they've got better braking. It's crazy to reduce it, but also the environmental impact because people are travelling at a slower gear for a longer period of time, so it's causing more pollution. Crazy decision in the first place.
This is Jubilee Road in Buckley, and campaigners say it's roads like this that illustrate what they see as a problem with the 20-mile-per-hour limit. This isn't a residential area in itself, but it does have pathways and roads that lead to residential areas. And they say so many drivers are trying to avoid Jubilee Road because of the 20-mile-per-hour limit that it shifted traffic and problems to other alternative routes. The campaigners say the U-turn misses the point of the 20-mile-per-hour limit.
If you're hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, it's reckoned that's equivalent to falling out of a first floor window. Not something which you want to do if you had a choice. But if you're hit by a car at 30 miles an hour, it's like falling out of a third floor window. And they can see that there's a huge difference in the potential damage which there is to people.
There'll be financial help for authorities that changed signs at a cost of millions to change them back. It's not clear how many roads that will actually be. There will still be lower limits around places like schools, but for campaigners, this is the reverse they've been looking for. Greg Milam, Sky News, Buckley.
Let's talk about this in a bit more detail now. I'm joined by Anna Semlyen, National Campaigns Coordinator for 20's Plenty, and also Ian Taylor from the Alliance of British Drivers. Thank you both for joining us here on the UK Tonight. Anna, I'll come to you first. Are you disappointed by the Welsh Government's decision?
No, I think a review was always going to happen. Tens of thousands of roads were changed, and we didn't expect that to go perfectly. It wouldn't. So there might be some minor changes around the edges, some roads that should not have gone 20, and some roads that are 20 that, are working well. And some roads that have stayed at 30 may in fact go 20.
Do you think this was impractical? Because it was, I think it's been described by the president of the AA as well-intentioned, but too much of a broad brush approach. Well-meaning, but in practice, not everywhere needed to be 20 miles per hour.
Well, this is global best practice. Spain's done it. Scotland is in the process of doing it. It's because it saves lives and prevents injuries. So 1,200 to 2,000 people won't be injured because of it. And that seems a very practical public health promotion to me.
Ian, from your point of view, is this being seen as a victory for motorists, or is that a bit too much? Is it more like common sense?
Well, it is common sense. I suppose you could call it a victory, but a qualified victory. What we're seeing now is they're going to make it easier for some councils to put some roads back. In other words, they're really only promising a review. There's no mention of how many or few roads actually might revert to a 30 limit, or let alone when. I think it's going to be the autumn at the earliest. Now, I don't wish to be unduly cynical here. The fact is, this promise has been wheeled out just before an expected elections, which always makes me a little bit suspicious. We do support and we praise those local organisations in Wales and elsewhere that have campaigned against this and brought about the policy change, because it was very much a blanket thing. And there are indeed some, in my opinion, a few, but some roads where 20 is the most appropriate speed. But there's rather more where we think it isn't, and it's too slow to be practical. So what we'd like to see is that review retain 20 limits only where there's sufficient evidence, robust evidence, to warrant the benefits that are claimed for it.
So we're talking about
otherwise, Wales could well be left with more lower speed limits than it had before.
So what's the compromise here? Because it seems that this broad brush approach, as it's been called, isn't popular. What would you like to see, Ian? What would be the compromise here between motorists and pedestrians? Is it to have these 20-mile-per-hour limits outside places like schools, hospitals, big built-up residential areas?
Well, there is probably room for some compromise. What we don't like is the fact that it's regarded as the default. We'd like to go back to 30 being the default, except where there's reason to lower it. Now, there are some roads which are very small or dangerous where 20 would, in fact, 20 probably is largely adhered to because the roads are so awkward, so small, people do it naturally. On the other hand, it should never, frankly, not even in residential urban areas, should never be applied to a main road, and usually not to what I call a through route. Let's say a spine road through an area, a bus route, something like a proper through route that people need to make progress down. So hospitals and schools, maybe. Once again, it depends on the road. I wouldn't even want to see that if it was on a main road, especially an A road. There's other places where, yes, there is something to be said for 20 limits, especially outside schools, but when it's being used by large numbers of children.
OK, Ian, let's bring in Anna here, because, Anna, you know, this does seem to be the argument, doesn't it? One of the most, well, in fact, the most popular petition on the Welsh Government's website, over 450,000 signatures. People just thought that, you know, 20 mile per hour, you know, across the board was not too much, but you see what I mean? Where do you think the compromise should be? Do you think there should be a compromise, or would you like to see this in place, despite its unpopularity?
Well, of course, it's very popular with children, with people with families, with the disabled, with people without cars. There's 500,000 children in Wales who want it. There's 300,000 people without cars who want it. There's 600,000 with discretionary level bus passes who want it.
But again, does that come back to it being in built-up areas, outside schools, hospitals, things like that?
Well, for instance, children, they're not helicoptered into a school. They have to get there along sometimes main routes. So if you regard a child's route to school as a priority route, then my argument and the argument of people who know about road safety and the dangers of 30 miles an hour is that we protect them. We have a duty of care. It's actually going to be quite difficult for some local authorities to increase the road speed 50%.
And expensive.
Because of duty of care and civil liability if there was a crash.
Anna, it's worth reminding people, anyone who has been on a speed awareness course, for example, it's drilled into you the difference that can be made in saving a life between 20 miles per hour and 30 miles per hour. So for those that don't know, it's worth reminding people.
Yes, it's considered about 5 to 7 times more dangerous if you're hit at 30 miles an hour. It's an 8.8 metre fall, a third floor building fall, as opposed to 20, which is like a first floor building fall. Also, the stopping distances are very different. They're 12 metres at 20 miles an hour and 23 metres at 30 miles an hour. So you can avoid a hazard much more easily if you're driving just a bit slower.
Yeah,
it doesn't slow down journey times very much either. It's about 17 seconds per mile more.
Yeah, again, that's something they tell you on a speed awareness course. I mean, Ian, it's hard to argue with something like that, isn't it? You do think, what's the rush?
Well, I don't like having to argue on the, shall we say, the best or worst speed to get hit by. I would prefer not to get hit.
No, she's arguing from a safety point
speed.
of view. She's arguing from a safety point of view, which is valid in this debate.
Well, it's a question also of where you draw the line. People need to get about. There is a safety aspect too. It's a question of balance to some extent. I mean, you could go slower still and presumably argue it would be safer still. But I'm not quite sure. I heard mention the fact that an awful lot of people who don't drive and children who go to school like 20. I don't know. I hope there's figures to back that up because I haven't seen them. But and once again, this is just Wales. This is to some extent a warning too to the rest of England and Scotland that unwarranted blanket 20-mile-an-hour limits are unacceptable to the most of the motoring public, and we're all at risk from them.
Well, Ian, like you said, it is a review at the moment. We will keep a close eye on what happens in Wales with regard to these lower speed limits. For the moment, though, Ian Taylor from the Alliance of British Drivers and Anna Semlyen, National Campaigns Coordinator for 20's Plenty. Thank you for joining us on the UK Tonight.
Thank you.
As still to come on the programme, what impact will the football governance bill have on smaller clubs? I'll be talking to the chair of Grimsby Town FC next. And the BMX rider who was the first ever person to perform this trick. He's now setting his sights on Olympic gold. Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. A new photograph of Prince Louis has been released by Kensington Palace to mark his 6th birthday. The picture, taken by the Princess of Wales, was taken in the last few days in Windsor, and it's understood to be unedited. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock joins me now. Unedited, that word says so much.
It says an awful lot, doesn't it? This is a very different thing, isn't it? Normally we'd expect the photo released the night before, so it makes the front page of the papers, it makes the breakfast bulletins, but it's all different. We're reminded again, these are unprecedented times, and the Prince and Princess of Wales decided to release this image at around lunchtime. Just one image. It was taken by Kate in Windsor a few days ago, and you can see Louis there. Now, if you take it back a bit, you can see he's lying down on a nice lawn, lying on a blanket, he's grinning, he's smiling. And this, you know, all reflects what's been going on at the moment, doesn't it? Ever since the Princess of Wales made that cancer diagnosis announcement, the couple really keen to stress they wanted time, they wanted space, they wanted privacy, and that the children were their absolute priority and, of course, remain their priority. And I think you could safely say that throughout the Easter holidays, they had exactly that. They did have space, they did have privacy. It was only last week that Prince William went back to work. No updates on Kate as expected, but clearly the couple took the decision they were going to release a photo. They were going to do it how they wanted to do it, which is why it popped up on their social media account, not through the usual channels. And it was their way also of saying thank you, I think, for all the good, will and messages they'd had. It's been a really difficult time for them. You know, we're reminded it was just over a month ago that we were in Windsor, weren't we, that night, following that really brave video Kate released. So here we are today. No more details about Louis's birthday, but you can imagine, having seen him on the balcony.
6-year-old birthday parties, don't we?
He'll have got to school with a grudge, I imagine, and be keen to have got home and start the birthday celebrations.
Oh, happy birthday to Prince Louis. The Princess of Wales herself had received a bit of a gift, a new honour, which I don't quite understand, so it's good that you're here to explain it to me. This came from the King, right?
Yes, there's a huge list of appointments came from Buckingham Palace today, but I think Kate's really stood out. She has been made a Royal Companion of the Order of the Companions of Honour. Basically, this is a select group of people chosen and who are recognised and rewarded for their public service, for their services to the arts, to the science, to medicine. And she joins the likes of, to give you a flavour of what we're talking about, Judi Dench, Elton John, David Attenborough. Kate's been given this award by the King in recognition for her contribution to public service and to the arts as well. But I think it's a real signal here, isn't it? The King giving this to his daughter-in-law, and she is the only member of the royal family to be made a Companion of Honour like this.
Interesting. Laura, thank you. Laura Bundock, our royal correspondent there. Thank you. Now, the Football Governance Bill had its second reading in Parliament earlier today amid concerns the government's plans could harm smaller clubs in the lower leagues. Well, the bill looks to establish an independent regulator for the game in a bid to ensure that clubs are sustainably run and there is financial resilience across the game. But just what impact will it have? Let's ask Chair of Grimsby Town FC, Jason Stockwood, who joins us now on the UK Tonight. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time. The Football Governance Bill, as a general idea, broadly welcomed. You've had a closer look at it. What would it mean for your club, do you think?
Well, thanks for having me on. I mean, it's absolutely critical that the UK gets this bill passed as it looks like it's going to now, and we get an independent regulator. The really important part of it is making sure the opportunity to create financial stability and sustainability for all clubs up and down the football pyramid is the absolutely critical bit. So the closest reading of it is Part 6 needs adjusting, which is about how that mechanism to make sure that the distribution from the Premier League is sufficient, that we can actually fulfil that aim of sustainability over the coming years.
Yeah, because the thing about the modern game is there are the haves and the have-nots, and the haves tend to be higher up the leagues, the have-nots at the lower end of the leagues. And, football is billed as a game for everyone. You support your local club, don't you, regardless of whether they're in the Premier League or they're non-league. Just how fair is it at the moment in terms of how that money trickles down, and how would this governance bill change that? How should it change that, in your view?
Well, it's totally unfair. That's the need. Remember, this came in response to the Super League debacle, when a number of those clubs at the top were trying to break away, actually called by other clubs in the Premier League, which people tend to forget. But actually, you know, one of the things, having had a career in the business world, is that football clubs are unique in that they're not traditional businesses. They don't have the same profit motive, bizarrely, as other businesses. But actually, they mean more to communities that they're rooted in. And actually, this is why they should be treated differently. This is why regulation is absolutely critical. Because if a football club goes bust, it's not just, you know, a business that will, you know, reform and come in a different way. It's really about the identity of a town. So it's absolutely critical that, you know, the football governance bill sorts out the finances and looks at the sort of egregious gap in wealth that's been created, remembering, Jane, that wealth has been created off the backs of all the football clubs up and down the pyramids in over 100 years. And just so happens, because the music stopped right now, or the last 20 years while the Premier League's existed, that those clubs at the top of the pyramid should take the benefit and take the profit. So, you know, this is a really good metaphor for what's happening in society, where those at the top, you know, really want to cream off the profits for themselves, when actually football belongs to all of us.
Well, Grimsby, as Sky News viewers will know, is one of our target towns in the run-up to the general election. Talk to me about how Grimsby Town Football Club is part of the community. How does it feed into the wider picture in your community?
Well, look, we're a club that's been around since 1878, you know, born out of a working class tradition. And actually, you know, we've spent more of our, you know, 100+ years in the top divisions until fairly recently, which we're hoping to turn around in the coming years. You know, but actually more than that, you know, it's part of our identity. You know, I moved away from the town, but the thing that kept me tied and coming back was the football club. And as I've got older, I've appreciated that, you know, it's such a big part of my identity in an ever-changing, increasingly complex world. It is the thing that has remained constant. And yet, you know, the economics and the sort of, you know, as I said, the disproportionate balance of wealth towards the Premier League is really putting that at risk. So it's absolutely the heartbeat of our community and needs to be for another 100 years, which is what this bill needs to solve.
And just a final quick question while I've got you about FA Cup replays. There are calls for this bill to include an amendment that, if implemented, it would ensure any changes to the FA Cup must be supported by a majority of eligible clubs. Because the idea has been thrown around that actually you should do away with FA Cup replays. And that, for a lower league club, is pretty devastating, isn't it?
Well, there's two aspects to it. There's the financial aspect of it, which I think is pretty clear that you know, we had an FA Cup run last year that was historic. First time we got to such the late rounds since 1934. So there's a financial element. But importantly, this is another reason for the regulator. The way this decision has been made in isolation, without consultation, and importantly, you know, it was I think it was an underhand tactic by the Premier League to take one of the negotiation chips off the table in the financial settlement. So, you know, but ultimately the game belongs to all of us, and actually everyone should be consulted if there's going to be such a substantial change to something that is so important to the whole nation.
Jason Stockwood, Chair of Grimsby Town Football Club, really good to see you on the programme. Thank you. We'll speak again, I am sure. We've actually got a special programme from Grimsby, the Politics Hub, coming live from our target towns, Grimsby and Cleethorpes, on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. So make sure you join Sophie Ridge and the team for that. Now, it's less than 100 days until the Paris Olympics, and for athletes hoping to take home gold, the countdown is on. 22-year-old BMX rider Kieran Reilly from Gateshead is one of those hoping to succeed for Team GB after a series of landmark victories over the last couple of years. In 2022, he made history by becoming the first ever person to perform a triple flare, a trick that's only ever been done before on video games. Well, I caught up with Kieran a little earlier and started by asking him whether he dreamt of the Olympics when he started riding at the age of just 8.
It was such a different dream. Like the Olympics was never something I ever thought about or thought I'd be working towards. And for me, it was seeing all these riders who had fancy cars. They didn't have to have a job. They could just ride their bike all the time. And they were doing road trips here, there and everywhere to America and Australia where it was sunny. And I was like, that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't care how I did it. I just wanted to be able to ride full time, not have a job. And I always thought that would happen by the time I'd left school. It didn't, but we got there in the end.
Well, Kieran, you certainly put in the work because you landed the world's first triple flare. Now, for those who don't know what it is, we're going to show them what it is and you doing it for the first time. Talk us through this move, because I understand until you did it, this trick had only been done in video games.
Yeah, it was literally like it all started with a passing idea. So there's a trick that I do called the double flare. So we'll start off with a flare. A flare is going up a ramp, doing a backflip, then turning 180 degrees to come back down the same ramp. And so in competitions before, I've done a double flare, which is go up, do 2 backflips and turn around. And I was talking to a team manager at Red Bull, and we were talking about trying to do a world's first trick. And in passing, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be crazy to do a triple flare? Like, I wonder if it'd be possible. And I remember like a month later, he called me and he was like, look, if you're actually willing to try this, like, we're more than willing to back you and support you to do it. And yeah, what was a bit of a passing idea with no thought ended up becoming real, and drastically underestimated the trick, to be honest.
Yeah.
So it was quite the ordeal.
Yeah, talk to me about the preparation that went into it, because it was months in the planning, not just physically, but mentally as well.
I think for us, like, usually when you learn a trick at a skate park, you know what I mean? It's just in a normal session when we're at the park for a couple of hours, and this just was completely its own entity, and we had to build the right ramps for it. We had to close the skate park for about 2 weeks. And I remember when the first stint, so the first time we went in and tried the trick, we had to think 10 days. And I was already thinking about what trick I was going to do next. So I was like, I'm going to do this trick in the first 3 days. And then I've got all this time to play on these ramps. And it wasn't at all like that. The only way to prep for it, honestly, was to just try it, which was the hardest thing about the trick. The crazy thing as well is that I just became a professional BMX rider at this point. Now, I just moved out of my parents' house down to Corby. And it was the first time I had my own space. I wasn't at all clued up on nutrition or training or anything like this. And like, I remember I watched the footage back from the first week that we had attempting this trick. And I was like looking at myself and I was like, I do not look like an athlete in this video, you know, like I've not been eating right, I've not been training. And I used to always have this excuse about the gym, like, well, I go to the gym, why not just ride for another hour? Which was a terrible excuse. And I was just in denial about it, basically. And I decided after that, like, I wanted to be as fit and as strong as I could be. I wanted to take the, I guess, like, label athlete more seriously, you know.
What can we expect from you at the Games, Kieran?
Been like everyone who's preparing for the Games as well. I'm working on new tricks that I want to debut there, and I'm hoping to put down the best competition run that I've ever done. I'd like to be able to compare this run to my World Championship winning run and make that run look just obsolete. So yeah, I'm going to be, right now I'm working to be riding the best I am, the fittest I am, and it's going to be interesting.
Kieran Reilly, one to follow at this summer's Games. Coming up here on the UK Tonight, I'm going to speak to the man who was pounding both the pavement and the Pinot at the London Marathon at the weekend.
With lockdown, which it has an impact on a lot of things, people felt that they needed a dog as a companion because they were isolated. So during that period of time, there was an extra 4 million dogs bought. So before lockdown, we had about 8 million dogs in this country. After lockdown, we have 12 million. Now, a lot of these have bought dogs because of what they like the look of, or it suits their personality or type or whatever. Unfortunately, when I first started working with XL Bullies, many, many years ago, as an expert witness under the Dangerous Dogs Act, I used to assess these dogs. They were quite reasonable. They were very, very reasonable. But what happened in about 2021 to 2022 is the bloodlines and varying other things changed. And because of that change, suddenly we found enormous amount of more deaths. In fact, 4 times more deaths in 2022 than we'd ever seen over the last 30 years. 75% of all the deaths between 2021 and end of 2023 were down to XL Bullies that did that attack, including a lot of other attacks that didn't end up in fatality. They wanted a different bloodline. There's a particular bloodline, and it's been said that over 50% of all the dogs in Great Britain are part of this particular XL Bullies bloodline, Kimbo, over in America, and they transferred his sperm over here. They've been messing about with DNA and variant other things. And Kimbo, unfortunately, was a result of a pairing between a brother and sister. These dogs were bred initially for fighting, so they have a preponderance towards aggression in that case. A lot of these dogs have been very, very good, but some of these bloodlines, and in particular that one, Kimbo, is an absolute monster. It really is.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, the London Marathon runner who tasted a different wine at the end of every mile during Sunday's race. Why, you ask? Why not, is what I say. First, though, Teddy is here with the sport.
Good evening.
Hello. Now, Teddy, earlier in the week, we were talking about Nottingham Forest and their complaint about VAR on social media, that complaint. They're being investigated by the FA and the Premier League because of that statement. They question the integrity of the VAR official. There's been a development today.
Yeah, 3 extremely poor decisions, they called them in a statement after that match. The defeat to Everton at Sunday caused a lot of furore at the time. It's actually developed today that it could have been a lot worse for Nottingham Forest in terms of the attention, because our senior reporter, Rob Dorset at Sky Sports News, has revealed that senior Nottingham Forest execs were so angry at half-time at Goodison Park that they wanted to put out a statement there and then, complaining about the performance of the officials and questioning their impartiality. At that point, apparently the media chief at that point was very quick to say not to do that, persuaded them not to do so, as it would cause a distraction in the second half and lead to a backlash. As you say, the Premier League and the Football Association are investigating nonetheless. Their observation from Forest that Stuart Atwell, the VAR, is a Luton fan, was somehow connected to the fact that they didn't get 3 penalty decisions, which they claim were extremely poor decisions against the veteran defender here, Ashley Young, a couple of alleged fouls, an alleged handball. Didn't get it, but it seems like it could have perhaps caused even more ire in the governing bodies had they released that at half-time. They will get the audio, by the way, from the VAR audio recordings from the time. There's referee Mark Clattenburg, former referee, who's now an assistant advisor at Nottingham Forest. They will get the audio from Stuart Atwell and company regarding those alleged penalties for Ashley Young. So it's an interesting time at Nottingham Forest, and tomorrow they've got their appeal to be heard against their 4-point deduction for breaching profit and sustainability rules as they sit with 4 games to go. Sarah-Jane, 1 point off the relegation zone.
Oh, it's all going on at the City Ground. Well, one of the officials involved has actually been given a big role at this summer's European Championships today.
Yeah, Nottingham Forest not happy at all with Stuart Atwell, but he is one of 8 English officials to be called up for UEFA for this summer's Euros. Anthony Taylor, the referee on the pitch at Goodison Park, one of them as well, as is Michael Oliver, another referee. So that's the big news off the field today for the officials. Meanwhile, the Premier League title race hotting up. Arsenal in action. We'll update you in a second.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
The big reveal. In Paris, unveiling Olympic and Paralympic kits. This, the look for Team GB. Back to basics. Classic red, white and blue. Style simplicity from Adidas.
I've been in the process of getting ready for Paris for years, and then all of a sudden it becomes real, and it's all coming to life. So yeah, it's very exciting to get in the kit, and it just makes me feel very proud and think I really want to make sure that I get here.
This, a traditional look to Team GB, at a time when variations on flag designs by sports teams has stoked heated debates. Team GB hope this kit will put the traditionalist minds at rest with a very patriotic design and no tinkering at all with the Union Jack. There it is in red, white and blue. For athletes, it's the technical specifications that matter most to maximise performance.
I was actually consulted in the design process for the Paralympic side of things as well, and we thought about access features, and the team sort of really focused on sort of not just the sort of performance side of it, but also the functionality and the access.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now it's time for something weird or wonderful here on the UK Tonight. And a wine connoisseur has gone viral after he sampled a different glass of wine at the end of each mile during the London Marathon on Sunday. Tom Gilbey had a slightly unorthodox way of hydrating himself during the race as he pounded both the pavements and the Pinot. Let's take a quick look.
Red. Could be a Pinot Noir. I reckon it's a Pinot Noir from Burgundy, 2018. Go on, Tom!
Well, I'm glad to say that Tom joins us now. Tom, explain the challenge to us, and did you get them all right?
So which bit do you want? So no, I didn't get them all right, but thank you for playing the two that I did. So, so the results were 7 totally right, 4 totally wrong, and the rest partly right.
It was interesting to see the faces of some of the people behind you as you were swilling from a wine glass during the marathon. What kind of reaction were you getting along the way?
They thought I was very odd, but my thinking, Sarah-Jane, was that I'm 52, so I might not win it. And there's a lot of people who are going to be doing it faster than me, but I didn't think there'd be that many people doing as many wines as me.
Well, you might not win it, but you ran it in 4 hours and 41 minutes, which is pretty impressive considering the recommendation is to drink a Warto, not Burgundy Pinot Noir, with the year of 2018. We don't condone drinking and running, but it seemed to work for you. How did you feel at the end? Sozzled or elated?
Can I have a bit of both? Absolutely hooked, I felt at the end, but it was great fun.
Well, it's a novel way of doing it, and of course this is what you do for a living. But you were running for a really good cause, so I think it's worth giving them a shout out because you went viral. You've got millions of views for what you did. So let's talk about the cause you were running for.
Sarah-Jane, thank you. I was running for Sober House, a hospice that looked after my mum in her last few days, and just one of many hospices that do incredible work. So, and we have, I think this is what you call viral, and the Just Giving page just keeps clocking over. So I feel absolutely honoured and so happy to be raising money for such a great cause.
Well, let's give the Just Giving page a plug and tell us how much you've raised so far.
Last look, 13,500, and the link is in my Instagram in the link in bio, and all rude messages and all donations most welcome.
Oh, well, running for a fantastic cause, and well done you. And just for those of us who might be interested in a bit of wine, what was the best one you had on those 26 miles, just quickly?
It's got to be a Barolo number 4, I think, because it had a bit of tannin, which gave me the grunt to continue.
Lovely. Excellent. Well, Tom, well done to you. We just want to update our viewers quickly on a story we told you about last week. On Thursday, I spoke to the knife crime campaigner Laura Hughes ahead of her running in the London Marathon. She set up the No Knife Crime group following the death of her brother Colin, raising money to buy bleed kits. She finished the race and raised over £20,000.